Hello everyone, this is Royale Miniatures here with another paint tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add elements like gravel and small rocks, and I'll even show you how to add static grass to your model's base. Now, once your model is ready to go and you have all the nice details painted in, and you can see here that when I've been dry brushing there's a little bit of green that's gotten onto the base, you're going to want to go ahead and wait until all that painting is done and then grab a toothpick, because what we're going to do next is apply some glue to the base of the model and get it ready. Now, I typically will use Elmer's glue in most cases because I find that it's one of the best glues to use because it dries just slow enough and that you can manipulate it and move it around on the base, and it will also dry quick enough that you're not waiting forever for your model to be able to be moved, because you'll see once I add the gravel to it how it will cling, and that really works in our favor. Now when I'm moving around and moving the glue with this toothpick, you can see that I'm gonna be kind of slowly spreading it out, and I want to make sure that I maintain a relatively even coat throughout this whole base because you want a lot of coverage so the glue will grab all different kinds of rocks, and you'll see in just a minute how that is affected when we have a good solid basing of glue. And what will happen is when you're using your Elmer's glue, you'll notice that right on the end of your model where your base is, it's going to kind of dry as you're going about this process. Don't worry too much about that. Just keep going on and making sure that the glue gets in all those little nooks and crannies. And that's why I recommend a toothpick, because you can see here that the glue is getting right up next to those areas of the foot. And especially in a lot of models, they'll have their foot just a little bit elevated. And you can see here, there's also this little gap here that I had just barely missed. So just make sure that you have good coverage. And once again, I had mentioned that the glue will dry on the end of most bases as you're putting and spreading the glue out. So go ahead and take the toothpick or whatever you're using to spread the glue around and pull it close to the edge. And then once you're ready, go ahead and dip it into the gravel or whatever material you're using. You can use dirt, you can use all kinds of different materials, but I really love this gravel because it clings really nice and it's easy to paint. And you can go ahead and let it sit for a couple minutes. I'd say about 5 to 10 minutes would be more than enough time. And then all the gravel will cling to the Elmer's glue in such a way that you can still manipulate it and move a lot of the smaller rocks around with your finger. But for the most part, all those rocks will be fully embedded in the glue. And you can see that I didn't really have to do anything other than spread the glue around effectively, and now I have a really good variety of rocks all embedded in this model, and it really makes a really cool landscape on the model's feet. Now, when I'm getting ready to move on to the next phase, I really want to make sure that I can clean up these edges. You'll see that I'm using my finger to kind of brush away little stray pieces of gravel. And right here you can also see there's a little piece of static grass, or maybe it's even hair. I'll be sure to go ahead and pull those out with a pair of tweezers, and I've waited for the glue to dry so I won't pull away too much of the top gravel. But once I pull these little tiny hairs, and I'm definitely thinking that these are small pieces of static grass, and once they're gone and we have that edge cleaned up, we're ready to move on to the next stage. And we're going to go ahead and use a watered down but very dark paint here, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of allowing this to act as an ink where I'm changing the color of the gravel, but I'm mainly using this to kind of make the texture look a little bit more muddied, make it look a little bit more like dirt. And you can see here how just adding like a very, very light layer of paint, this is essentially, watered down, but it will really change the feel of the base. And we went from essentially like a desert environment, because the gravel was very, very light, to something that's a little bit more like a rich, damp soil. And once that's ready, it's going to be applied fairly thick so it is an even coat. I'm going to let that dry before I move on to the next phase, and I'm going to see just how the final color looks once it is no longer wet in the rocks below. I'm going to go ahead and get a very, very rich brown, a very deep brown, and I'm going to go ahead and get that ready to dry brush. So you can see I get a wider brush. This is a size 3 brush, and I'm going to go ahead and lightly start applying that to the armor itself. Now the reason I'm doing this is I feel that a lot of bases, although they look excellent, I feel that a lot of people will actually forget to kind of make it look like the model is interacting with the environment. And what I mean by that is if you have a really, really dirty scene, or especially a extremely heavy object, for instance this Marine, he is covered in extremely heavy armor. He probably weighs upwards of 250 pounds, I'd estimate. So he's going to be really kicking up a lot of dust, especially as he moves through a dirty environment. So all I'm doing is using a very, very light dry brush to just get a little bit of dirt on his armor, so it kind of makes it look like he's interacting with his environment, and it makes a really interesting, more weathered look on the model. And I'll make a totally separate video to kind of cover this concept more in depth, but since we're going over basing, I thought I would touch upon it briefly and just kind of show you guys a quick way to make your models look more blended into your bases. Alright, now we're going to move on to one of my favorite parts of basing, adding static grass. Now I'm going to be using a toothpick with the Elmer's glue again, only this time instead of putting the glue directly onto the base, I'm going to be applying it much more selectively by taking the tip of the toothpick and putting it into a ball of Elmer's glue. You don't need to apply too much pressure here when you're adding the glue, just a little bit of tension when you're just making contact with the base, and then the glue will just leach into the rocks, and then you'll be ready to go. And after I apply to all the areas that I want, I'll kind of work around in between rocks. I'm ready to move on to static grass. I'll typically apply it with a pair of tweezers, and I'll just grab one little clump of static grass, and then I'll just grab little clumps and move it all around the model. You can do a similar method to what we had done earlier, where I completely submerged the entire base into all the gravel, but I would recommend just doing small little clumps of static grass when you're applying it to the model. That way you won't have too much that will get stuck to your model with static electricity. And once you're ready to go, just go ahead and shake the bulk of the static grass off, and it will jump right back into the container you had it in originally. And once you have all the glue dry, and it doesn't take too long for static grass to dry, I'd wait about, I don't know, 10-15 minutes again, just because we're using Elmer's glue, and then I'll do the final ring around the base. And in this case, the person who asked for this particular paint scheme and colors wanted to have a black base, so I'm just going to go ahead and touch that up, and once that's done, the model is finished. This is the first commission that we had for the contest winner, who commented on the kind of model they wanted to see. They wanted to see some camo, they wanted to see some custom sigils, and they wanted to have some crossed swords, and they wanted to have all these little details, and I really think we nailed it. It turned out really great, and I'm really happy with all the colors, and I really hope that you enjoy it once it's delivered to you. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that this helps you. I'm almost done with this video series, just one more to go, and then I'll be moving on to a completely new model, a completely different paint scheme, and I'm really looking forward to showing you what comes next. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.